Hi, I am Maurine McFarlane, and I'm so glad you're here. There are many genres of music out there to listen to, but we at Cloud Records Music Podcast create music because we are inspired, and we want to inspire you. Inspire you to have a deeper experience of peace, love, hope, and connection to one's soul. Come along with me and experience the most beautiful and enjoyable music experience that will touch your soul. At the end of our conversation, we'll warn Cloud Records LLC music as part of your music library. Welcome to Cloud Record Music Podcast 5th episode. For all the music lovers that love gospel music, you're in for a treat. I'm about to engage in a deep and intimate conversation with the talented, gifted, and amazing Robert Mavorich. Join us. Robert, otherwise known as Bob Mavorich, is a gospel music historian, author, and radio host. Gospel Memorials, a radio program of classical gospel, spiritual, and jubilee music. The radio program received a commendation from the African American Museum of Philadelphia and heard Bob a Gospel Image Award in 2017. It was named Best Gospel Radio Show of the Year by the Rhythm of Gospel Award in 2018. He was inducted into the Gospel Industry Network Hall of Fame in 2021. The two-time Grammy-nominated author, album notes, The Gospel According to Malco Music Group 2019, and The King of Gospel Music, The Life and Music of Reverend James Cleveland, Malco Music Group in 2021. Bob writes about classic and contemporary gospel music as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Gospel Music. The website formerly known as the Black Gospel blog received the Rhythm of Gospel Award in 2021. His first book, A City Called Heaven, Chicago and the Birth of Gospel Music, was published in March 2015 by the University of Illinois Press as part of its Music in America Live series. It received in 2016 Certificate of Merit in Historical Sound Recording Research from the Association for Recording Sound Collection. It was named one of the best nonfiction books of 2015 by the Chicago Book Review. His book about the best-selling gospel album, Peace Be Still, by James Cleveland and the Angelic Choir was published by University of Illinois Press in November 2021. He also received Certificate of Merit from the Association for Recording Sound Collection. Now, I'm excited for you to hear my captivating conversation with the amazing Robert Mavorich, who joined us from his home in Chicago. At the end of our conversation, I hope Cloud Record Music will be part of your music selection. Okay, so I am so excited today. I get to meet in person someone who I've talked to and I feel very connected to all the way from Chicago. And I'm going to say my friend, Bob Mavorich. Did I get that correct?
Mavorich.
Oh, forgive me.
That's all right. That's all right.
Don't want to mess up your name. Nope. You know, Bob, I have to say welcome to Cloud Records Music Podcast. And I'm so excited you're here. And here's why. Ever since through email, I just feel this connection to your work. But also I have this feeling that you're one of those people that would like to see me succeed at this.
I do.
Yeah. And so I think that's where the connection comes from. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, my friend, for having me on your show.
Yes, it's my pleasure. So here's my first question. I'd like for you to share with the audience about the Journal of Gospel Music. Like when did it started? How did you get into it? You know, what created this passion?
Sure. I started it in 2004. I had been writing about gospel music for a website out of Vancouver Island in Canada, but the gentleman who owned the site had decided to retire. It was a blues website, but I did the gospel section. And when he decided to retire, then at that time I really didn't have a place to contribute any writing. So my wife had suggested that maybe I should start a blog, and so I did start a blog. I looked up to see if there was a gospel music blog already. And I believe that there was. I'm sorry that it sounds like Illinois Bell back here. Um,
You're a busy guy.
I'm telling you, and it's probably all spam calls too. Anyway,
Uh,
I wanted to see, was there a gospel music blog? And I believe that there was. I just didn't know it at the time. So I thought I was the only one. So I decided to start what I called the Black Gospel blog. At that time, I called it that because I thought if people see my face, they're thinking I'm writing about Southern gospel, the white
mhm.
quartets and so forth. And I didn't have any knowledge of that genre. So I just called it the Black Gospel blog. And it really was there to help independent artists. I had been a member of the Gospel Announcers Guild out of the Gospel Music Workshop of America. I used to go to the meetings. I would meet with artists, and they would hand me their CDs, and they said, "Would you play it on your radio show?" Well, the thing was, my radio show, Gospel Memories, was all about the oldies, and so I couldn't
Mm,
say I could play it on my show because it was too contemporary. So I felt sort of guilty taking these packages and projects without doing something. So I thought, well, maybe this idea of a blog would be as a way to review these projects I'm receiving from
mhm.
independent artists, and it grew from there.
Wow. And now look at it. I mean, your website is really amazing. And you cover so many awesome gospel singers, which leads me to my question. You have something you call the JGM pick. What is the process that you go through to select a song or an artist to be on that?
It is completely emotional. And I think it's important because gospel music is an emotional music, whether you say
Hmm.
spiritual, encouragement, hope, it's an emotional music. So as I listen to the selections that I receive, I'm listening for something. It's like something you can't quite describe, but it just sort of separates itself from the rest. All too often, gospel suffers from a disease of sameness. Everybody wants
Yes.
to sound like other people. And so you get a lot of music that, I mean, it's all very genuinely done and very creative and so forth, but it doesn't stand out.
Mm,
And so I'll hear something and it will catch my attention and I'll listen more. And I'm listening for, the lyrics. Are the lyrics creative, or are we just rehashing what everyone else has already written? Is there something about it that just kind
mm,
of makes it different? And sometimes it can just be down to the singer's anointing, the singer's delivery.
mhm.
You really feel their passion, you feel their belief in the message, and you say, "Yep, that's it." And sometimes it just has to do with, again, it hits you. I mean, there have been some songs that, and I know we'll probably talk about the best of that we do at every end of year, that just
Yeah.
leaves you like, oh my goodness, it just
Mhm.
stops you in your tracks. And so that's what I'm looking for when I think about the
Right.
pick of the week. I get hundreds of releases, and I can only review a few just because time won't. But it's the pick of the week is like it stands out.
Yes. And I find that interesting what you just said about the sameness of the sound, right? And when we decided at Cloud Records that we wanted to go into this spiritual, inspirational, or gospel/gospel music, we were looking for a different sound, right? And I find that it's more difficult to break through when you don't have the same beat, the same rhythm, and you're trying to, it's not new, but it's not the regular, in this genre. However, your pick, you have selected, and I've presented to you some of our songs that has made those picks, right? And so, can you kind of share with us, for example, Jesus Christ is Lord? What about that particular song and the artist, Camilla Green, that she was chosen? She was the first one I think I submitted to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think my description fits very well with the Cloud Records submissions to the Journal of Gospel Music. First of all, I'm hearing real instruments. I'm hearing a production quality that's not overproduced. It's not compressed. It's not bombastic. Lots of instruments coming in at the same time, trying to kind of blow your earbuds out, kind of thing. It's a quality of production and tone, and you've always had great vocalists. I mean, I have often and might have even said this in the reviews that it almost is like Broadway musicals. It's this
Yes.
quality where the individuals are trained singers, or at least if they're not trained singers, they know how to sing, how to deliver the message. It's a great message, but it's this sort of sense of production quality. It's semi-classical in some respects. I don't try to say that in the review because, I know what you're talking about. The sameness comes from the need to get on radio, to get on streaming, and the programmers want to hear everything kind of sounding the same. They don't want something coming out of left field. That has not always been the case in radio, but it is the case now. And
Mm.
so I know how difficult it is. Sometimes you get a quality product and it's different and they don't know quite what to do with it. And there are many artists, wonderful artists that have experienced the same thing over the years. But yeah, it's just this combination of production, instrumentation. There's no synthesizers trying to sound like horns. There's quality musicians, singers. The message is there. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful music. That's why I picked them.
Thank you. And you're right. All of our artists are classically trained. Some are opera. They have all these different skills, they sing in different languages. So we're very fortunate. And we do believe, though it's a challenge for us to break through, that we're going to find our niche, and we're going to get out there and we'll be big. I was listening to Camilla Green the other day. She was singing another song. And every time she sing, it just like, makes me want to reach for something higher, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, this girl, she's just, it's just like she just needs to be known. She's just so powerful, she's just awesome. All
Well,
of them. But
you're artist. You have a sound. I mean, say you said Motown had a sound. Atlantic had a sound. You have a sound, and I would not stop doing what you're doing because, there's so many others that are doing music that is kind of falling into the realm of the sameness. And while there's some really good music, like for example, Heather Headley, she was in The Lion King. She's a Broadway star. She did a gospel album some years ago. It was a masterpiece.
wow.
She got a Grammy Award for that album.
Wow.
She could
Yeah.
barely get a Stellar Award because it was so much different. It was Heather Headley. She's a beautiful
Yes.
singer. She knows how to put a message across. She had Smokey Norville on one track, and that's kind of the one I think that got the Stellar Award. But
Hmm.
it did not get any awards. But she got the Grammy, and I met her once, and I said, what you're thinking? She says, I'm happy to have the Grammy Award.
That is the prize, right? Yeah.
Right, but again, it's a beautiful album, but it was just hard for radio programmers to fit it in because our listeners want to hear a certain sound, and they drive the revenue, so that's where it goes. But I do believe there is a place for what you're doing because it is it has people. If they open themselves up to it, I think they would really appreciate it. And I know as we're talking about hymns coming back and some of the more traditional aspects of the church coming back, I think people will be looking for this sort of meaning in the music and not being beat over the head with the message. And you don't do that.
Right, right, right. And we always say we make music because we're inspired. We want to inspire others. But I love the lyrics in our music because it's almost like messages, right, to God's people, and it's a message of encouragement and hope, and which everyone needs, especially during our time like this. Based on what you do, you're in gospel radio. You do all these awesome things within this field. Do you also consider yourself a critic? A
I'm not
music
about
critic of gospel.
I suppose I am. However, I suppose I'm not like a Robert Christgau kind of critic where I'm always looking for the bad parts and trying. I sort of, I don't know. I've always worried about that word critic. I've even worried about the word journalist. I just kind of consider myself a writer. But for gospel, here's my philosophy of reviews, and I guess it's just my opinion, and it may not be everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
If an album, if a song is just so poorly put together, I don't want to go out there on the journal and bash the person's ministry and say, unless they want me to. And sometimes people will say no, any kind of publicity is good publicity. But if I get something, it's clearly not ready. The person
Then you're
didn't.
not going to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to go in and be mean. So I try to be as critical as possible in a way that's encouraging. I think of, for example, I think of Roger Ebert when he used to review movies, and they used to criticize him for giving high marks to, say, a comedy or something that was just a very simple movie. And they say, how come, you give us such a high rating to such, lowbrow comedy? And he would say, because it was the best in its field. And so I am reviewing a lot of different types of genres of music, of gospel. Some of it's traditional, contemporary, Christian hip hop and all. And I may not like all of the varieties of music that are out there, but I want to make sure that as a critic, we'll just say that I review it in the sense of how it's being delivered and in the genre it's being delivered, and yet I don't want to come out and just say this is bad, that's bad. Some critics can be very mean, and I suppose in pop music it's part of the deal. But I just think in gospel, there's a way to get the message across without having to be mean and explicit, and I try to do that.
Right. Yes. Well, I would encourage everyone to make sure they visit your website and, just check out, what you do, because it's really impressive. So I am really excited to discover that I Am Strong by Carpathia Jenkins was selected as one of the best single Renaissance for 2021. You have to tell me about that, and how do you select from among so many songs that you're week of the pick? I mean, you have so many songs. How did she make it in that? I'm very impressed.
Oh, well, it just, as I hear them and I review them for the pick of the week, those who particularly strike me is like sort of, I say, take your breath away, where you just stop and say, oh, this is a good one. I will make sure to keep it in a file so that by the end of the year, I have a list of all of the songs and albums and like like compilations of traditional or old music reissues. So I have a list. So I have a running list every year. And again, it represents what I think are the best of the best, the songs that just really hit me, particularly may be different for other people. But again, it struck me, the quality of that song, her singing. I might have been even the first, was it maybe the first release or one of the first that you sent to
It's
me?
actually the second release. The first one was the one that you also love, which was Jesus Christ is Lord.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
and it was just, but it just struck me as you have the string section comes in, it sets the tone. The singer knows what they're doing. They're delivering the message well. It's got the feel that's just the sacred or spiritual feel to it. It is professionally done, and you can really tell that time was put to it. So in looking at the songs that really touched me over the years, particular year, that's how I pick it. That's why I always say I'm not. This is not based on sales or anything, any kind of metric. It's just based on complete subjectivity of saying, this is what I believe to be the best songs of the year. And oftentimes they're not the top number ones of the gospel charts or Christian charts.
Right.
Sometimes they are, Lauren Daigle or Smokey Norfolk or something, but they're the ones that I think are the best of the year.
Amen. And I'm really happy it doesn't base on sales, because as you know, we're struggling getting it out there. We are trying different methods, of course, and it will eventually. But it's like any business where you don't have someone to open the door for you. I always say, you have to carve the door yourself, and that process takes a while. But believe me, once we get our niche, I think the world is just going to go crazy over these songs. They are beautiful and well done.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think what you have that, others have struggled in an opposite way, like say Christian hip hop artists who were thrown out of churches because they said we don't want that gangster rap in our church, and it says not gangster rap, it's rap, it's Christian lyrics. They've had the other, so what churches have pushed back. I think you're on the other end of the spectrum where they love the music, they just don't quite know how to program it. Right? It's like, wow, where do we put this? And again, I mentioned Heather Headley. I mentioned Forever Jones struggled with that, the family group. The programmers liked it. They just didn't know where to put it. That's just a marketing, and that's what we live with. In a perfect world, you wouldn't have that. Back in the day in radio, pop radio, you might have several different types of songs all together, but now they all kind of have to sound the same in order to be marketable to the constituents.
I know it is a tough road, but we're going to stick with it because we do like big numbers. And like you said, it's a combination of almost like Broadway and classical, but they're so beautiful once they get there. Yeah. It will go across age group and, everything. It's just really good.
I think that, to your point, the age group too, I think as people mature, they start to really appreciate the nuances, of gospel and any kind of music, in fact.
It's like fine wine. Takes a while to. Yeah. All right. So something exciting happened to me in relations to you. I'm reading your book, A City Called Heaven, Chicago and the Birth of Gospel Music. I happen to love history. So I'm going to show you guys it.
There it is. Yes.
There it is. See?
Yep.
I am recommended to I want everybody to see it. I'm recommended to everyone to get this book. If you like gospel music, if you're a history buff like me, because I am, and you want to learn about the transition from the South to the North, please, first of all, what inspired you to write this book? And it's a well-written book. And I've not finished it yet, actually, but I'm continuing to read it. But it's obviously well-written. You must have done a lot of research, talking to a lot of people, and you just know the detail of the transition or, the migration from the South to the North. And it explained to me that what I didn't understand before, the relevance and the impact of Chicago on Black music, not just gospel music, but like jazz and all the other. So please, what inspired you to write this? And, please tell us about it.
Sure. Well, I was inspired to write it actually because I was at a kind of my career where I had spent dozens of years as a fundraiser. And I had worked at an organization, and I just kind of came to this conclusion, like, I don't know that I want this career on my tombstone. What have I done? You kind of, I don't know if it was an existential crisis or what, but it's 2006. And I decided that's it. I want to write, I want to do something, and I'm never going to be able to do it if I'm living this kind of life. So I was going to write a book about the Roberta Martin singers. And I talked to Tony Heilbut, who's written a book called The Gospel Sound. It's sort of a classic in the genre field of gospel. And he said, well, why don't you write about Chicago? He said, I don't know if you'd get enough material for a whole book on Roberta Martin. So I thought about that. And so because I'd been in the Gospel Announcers Guild in Chicago, I knew like Eugene Smith from the Roberta Martin singers and Willie McFadder from the Alex Bradford singers. And I got to meet artists who were Reverend Dr. Clay Evans. And so I was in a good position to interview people. At that time, I was fortunate too, in that a dozen of them had passed away before the book even was published. And I missed some people because they died just before the book was published. Or before I started writing it. But I just thought, it's one of those stories. I think it was Maya Angelou that said, if there's a book you want to read and you can't find it, write it.
You just read it. Yes.
And I didn't see anyone writing it. There were books on doo-wop in Chicago and jazz and blues and every other kind of music in Chicago, but gospel. And I thought, well, for heaven's sake, gospel was born here. Why? And I just thought, well, I'll do it. It took 8 years. Took up my savings account. It took everything, but I was lucky to have University of Illinois Press to accept it. and in their Music in American Life series. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, it was giving gospel its due, that this is an important music. It was born here in Chicago, and it was based on this idea of the migration, bringing Southern folk traditions to Chicago. But I also wanted to make sure that this book spoke from the position of the churches, because all too often, people my color writing books about gospel would focus on the
Right.
recordings and
Mm-hmm.
uh, the um, the shows and the performances and the awards. But it was like, no, this music was born in the church, and so it needs to start. It needs to come from the church. The message needs to
Yeah.
come from the church.
I just love the way you break everything down for me, even with the you know, at first, you have all these little small churches in this neighborhood, and the music they were playing versus the larger church. But look at it today. I mean, and I love the story too, because even though you were telling about the migration, just that story in itself was powerful. And then you had the gospel and the churches and the music in it, and we see that transition. It was just well done. And I know there are people out there who want to learn about the issue of gospel that didn't even know, like I didn't know the things, that written in this book. So it was quite, eye-opening for me. So I
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Yeah, a lot of the same things happen this today that happened back then. Artists not getting the respect they deserve, having to fight for,
yeah.
visibility, and so it's the same old story all over again.
Yes. Now I have to ask. So you know a lot, and you're very engaging and involved in terms of gospel music, specifically for Black gospel music and
Hmm.
bringing attention.
Hmm.
Were you raised in a Black church, or were you part of that community, or is just something you just love? Uh,
It's yeah, I was not raised in the Black church. I was actually grew up Catholic. I was a musician. I worked in the music ministry of a couple of churches, and in my university dorm we had a chapel and that sort of thing. Um, and but I always loved Black music, even as a kid. That was the difference. Was that when my friends were listening to the Beatles back then, I was listening to Booker T and the MGs and Motown, and I don't know why. I just liked the music.
mhm.
I can't say that I wasn't called names as a little kid. You can imagine little kids and how mean
I
they can
can't
be cruel.
imagine.
Yeah,
Yes,
how
yes,
cruel they can
yes.
be. But I like the
Mhm.
music, and but I never had heard gospel until I was like, 1984. So I would have been like maybe 21 years old. And I was listening to the radio, and I heard a radio broadcast from Chicago. Uh, and I heard gospel music on this radio broadcast, live worship service. And it just struck me right then and there. This is the source of all of the music that I enjoy, the Motown, the
Wow.
sax, all that, the doo-wop, the blues, R&B that I did really enjoy. And so I just started listening to it then, but I didn't know anything about it. I had to sort of teach myself. I did eventually. My late wife was a teacher at a school on the west side of Chicago called Providence St. Mel. It was an all African American school. So she would get invited to Black church events for her students, and I would go with her then. I mean, literally, this was the first time I set foot in a Black church, was probably at the age of, my goodness, 25, 26. So
Okay.
I didn't grow up in it, but I think I sort of came to it as kind of like from a born again feel, that
Yes.
because I didn't grow up with it, I didn't have any preconceived feelings about it. I loved it. And
Mm.
it didn't mean anything other than really spiritual music. To this day, gospel music really is more of a church to me than any church.
Yeah, wow. Well, it shows in your writing, it shows in everything you've done. And you've done this genre, this culture, this community, such justice in the writing. So
Thank you.
well
Thank you.
done.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Now, for those who want to submit their work to you, how do they do that so they can get a chance of maybe be the pick of the week?
Right, right. There's a couple of ways to do it. You certainly can send an MP3 or WAV file to me at Bob M at journalofgospelmusic.com, or you can send a hard copy to my address, and I can provide you all that information. Um, I'll give everybody on your podcast a very big clue. Um,
Okay.
I if you send your single to me, I cannot guarantee it will be reviewed only because I get so many. But if you send your album or EP, I will review it. If it is not great quality, I might contact you and tell you that and not review it. But I try to review every album and EP. I mean, I shouldn't say try. I do review every album and EP that I get. I just can't do all the singles because there's just too many. I'm trying, Maureen. One of these days, I'll figure out a way around it. I'm thinking like the old days of Cashbox, where they would just have a bunch of singles and just give them grades, A plus, B, and just do a bunch of them like that. But right now, I'm just able to do maybe a couple a week, and I get probably 15 a week. So I just have to be
It's
picky.
a lot. Yes, yes. And tell us again, share with them your website so they can at least check out the True Gospel website.
Sure. It's a journalofgospelmusic.com, and there is actually a pop-up. So if somebody wants to send their single for review, they can actually click on that pop-up, and it will give you the details on how to submit it. And then our address is there as well. So if you want to submit a full project. And here's another clue. I'll give you, I have not actually mentioned this to anybody else, so you're an exclusive on this. Sometimes if I know of a particularly important release, I will pitch other places to review it. So for example, when Tasha Cobbs Leonard did her album from the Grand Ole Opry stage, I just thought this is pretty significant, considering that for decades, the Grand Ole Opry would never even have a black person on their stage unless it was DeFord Bailey. But it was, so here's it, to have gospel by an African-American singer on the Opry stage was so cool. So I pitched that to a magazine. And I've done that on occasion when I just know the album is pretty important.
Yes.
And if they don't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that is quite impressive. I mean, that's what I love about you, because, it's always like you go out of your way to make sure that person get exposure when you really think their work is good.
Absolutely.
So
that's the one thing I can absolutely say convincingly and confidently to you is that if there is an artist out there who just has the talent, who just blows me away, I will review that. Do you know who Doe is?
No.
Okay, Doe is now she's a Grammy nominated gospel singer, who I remember when she was with her family band. And I just remember thinking she's so incredibly talented, and she has now become one of the big stars. There's been others, Ruth LaAntra, who I knew only as they were just starting out. Yale Hilton, who sometimes their parents would contact me. I've got this daughter or son, and you're like, wow. So I will sometimes go behind the scenes, Maureen. If I know somebody might fit, I'll go to a guy or woman record company and say, he might want to listen to this. They don't always respond. And in some instances they do, sometimes they don't, but I will try.
But you certainly did. Yes. And I know you did that for us as well. So I certainly appreciate that. I will also have all your information below too, so they'll have that. I am very grateful, and I am trying to make it to Chicago because I promised you dinner. So I'm going to try to get there before the end of the year, though, and take you to that dinner.
Definitely. Yeah, we're going to do it.
Absolutely. But I am just so thrilled, first of all, to meet you the way we did, and the way you just embrace the music and the encouragement you're always given. I am just really grateful for that. And in fact, you give a pretty prophetic word at the beginning of the year. You said Cloud Record is going to be successful, and I believe it. Mm-hmm. So that's in line with the word that I get from God. So I'm holding on to it and keep working hard at it. So I thank you so much.
Thank you,
I'm
Maureen.
especially so grateful, and thank you for taking your time. I know you're busy, to sit with me for half an hour to share this time with us. So listen, thank you so much. And for those that are watching us, I want you guys to subscribe to Cloud Record Music Podcast, share it, and follow us. We want this to grow, right? So,
that's right. That's right.
Just do that. And of course, you must check out Bob work and submit your music to him. He'll get back to you. He's very diligent at that.
I do my best, that's for sure.
You certainly do. So once again, Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maureen.
I look forward to seeing everyone in 2 weeks.
Thank you,
Have a
Maurine.
good day, Bob.
Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my
Thanks a lot.
pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.